Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Vet Development Centre's webinar, Influencing Behavioural Change in Self and Others, with our fantastic presenter today, Martin Probst. My name is Maria, and I will be moderating the webinar for you today. I'd just like to let you know that this session is also being recorded, and also if you have a question, please use the little chat bubble which is located at the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. Your feedback is important to us in helping us to deliver quality programs. So at the end of the webinar, you will be sent an email with a short evaluation survey, which we encourage you to complete. Also, you will, your certificate of attendance will be emailed to your nominated email address, along with access to this webinar recording. I just need to let you know the PowerPoint is not available, but you will receive a recording so you can have a look at it again and again and again if you need to, of course with the presenter's voice. So without further ado, I'd like to thank you for today's for attending today's webinar, and let's get going. Martin, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Oh, fantastic. Well, I'll just let you go with it. Thank you.
Excellent.
Okay,
Thank you very
bye.
much for the introduction, Maria, and a big welcome to all participants to today's webinar on the topic Influencing Behavioral Change in Self and Others. I hope you started the week well, and I'm looking forward to spending the next hour with you. And I would like to get straight into it as I want to give you as much insights as possible into this topic. Now, some of these concepts might be new to you, and I really encourage you to have a curious and open mind throughout this webinar. And should you have any questions, I will give you the opportunity to ask them at the end. However, should I go too fast or perhaps there's a point where you can't connect the dots, please feel free to send me also a comment throughout the webinar so I can give you more clarity on this topic before we move forward. If that's okay with you, just please give me a quick okay or just put your hands up also to ensure that everybody can hear me. Fantastic, there they come. Awesome. So thank you very much. That's cool. So first and foremost, we need to be very clear that challenging behaviors can have an enormous negative impact on organizations' day-to-day operations. They can destroy long-term business relationships, as well as severely affect individuals on a physical, mental, and also on an emotional level. So this webinar, I'll just quickly get used to it. This webinar will provide you with behavioral solutions for a clear understanding of human behaviors that will ensure you can increase your personal and social capabilities, your confidence and self-awareness. Also enhance people skills, and last but certainly not least, give you insights into emotional intelligence. Now, let's be very clear from the start. We all influence ourselves and others with everything we do. The question we must ask ourselves, though, is, am I influencing myself and others in a positive and resourceful way or not? For example, I currently influencing you with everything I'm saying and everything that I'm showing you in this webinar. In other words, you cannot be the same person at the end of this webinar as you used to be at the beginning when you joined in. And you may wonder why. It's actually because you will hear about new information, concepts, and strategies, which gives you a different perspectives, and that will change you. We also need to understand that human beings are very complex creatures, and difficult behaviors are actually mainly caused because of differences in values, wants, needs, and also expectations. And our ego is often highly skilled in creating those problems out of an experience by adding a complicated story around it. Although our ego, I must say, is there to protect us, it loves complexity and does not always serves us in an empowering way. It often leads to fear-driven behaviors as the ego is purely interested in knowing, judging, justifying, being right, looking good, and also to get even. And that certainly are not very good motivated to find solutions and change behaviors. Therefore, we need to really overcome our ego by understanding that people are not their behaviors. Please just type me a quick yes if you can agree that you yourself perhaps demonstrated behaviors in the past that really surprised you, and when you thought, wow, what was that actually all about? Why did I do that? Behaviors that are not at all reflect any of your values or what you actually stand for. So behaviors that simply don't reflect who you are. Yeah, thank you very much. I got a no from, oh no, that's a yes as well from Rachel. Yeah, cool. Excellent. Thank you very much. So, yes, we really need to understand people are not their behaviors. Now, most likely, this was caused by the ego taking over based on a fear response that triggered that fight, flight, or freeze mode, which we have in us as a bit of a defense mode. That's why it's so important that we don't get caught up in the drama, power games, or any other fear driven behaviors. Instead, we actually need to really accept the person and calibrate on their behaviors. You need to find out what is their positive intention. Ultimately, let's face it, we all want the same thing. We want to be respected, we want to be appreciated, we want to be loved and valued. So when we or other people behave in weird ways, don't judge the person on their behaviors. Instead, look beyond the behavior and ask yourself, what's triggering that behavior and what is the person trying to achieve? Now, this does not mean that we view the other person's behavior as positive. You may even find it quite disrespectful or rude or even appalling. However, you need to look behind the behavior to really appreciate the positive intention of it. For example, if a student, a colleague, or anyone else screams at you, that person may feel misunderstood, insignificant, or not listened to at all. So, which causes the actual undesirable state or behavior. When we look at the intention behind the behavior, we might find out that the person simply wants to be understood. Just quickly get the next slide here. That the person wants to be understood, appreciated, and respected. And right at that point, the person most likely believes that screaming at you or undermining you is the best or even the only way to get your attention and to achieve their needs, wants, and expectations. Although if you would ask them later, they might be quite embarrassed about their own behaviors. So please remember, people are not their behaviors. And once you have a good understanding of their positive intention, explore alternative and more resourceful way to help the person achieve their needs, wants, and expectations. Because then we need to look at the positive influence of the behaviors, of course. And this case of the person feeling misunderstood, insignificant, or not listened to, you may want to pay more attention to what the other person is saying. Start asking great questions or give the person their full attention to acknowledge their values and needs and expectations. Now, do you think that the person would still feel like they have to yell or scream at you? No, I don't think so, because there is no need anymore for that particular behavior. And that's really what I call true influence. So let's have a look at how we can get a better understanding of our thoughts, emotions, and behaviors, as well as how we create our reality, which is really interesting, and get the better understanding of what actually makes us tick. This will give us also the tools of empowering to influence behavioral change in self and others. Because successful people are very aware of their thought processes, where unsuccessful people fell consistent victim to their own negative thoughts. Now, the communication model that I'm just about to share with you explains how we create our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. And the more familiar you are with this highly beneficial model, the better you can understand other people's point of view and therefore communicate with greater flexibility to positively influence their behaviors. No matter if it's a student, a fellow employee, or even your boss, it helps you to relate to people easier, respond in their terms, and overcome difficult behaviors and conversations. It also helps you to understand and utilize this model in so many different other ways. And this is actually how it works. So let's get straight into it. The process begins with external events. Everything that happens outside of us, which is an experience that we filter in through our five senses. I'll just quickly check in before we move on with the comments here. Yeah, cool, Caroline. Yeah, absolutely. It really assists in so many different ways, not just business, it relationships and everything else. Absolutely. So what's happened is, and I just quickly go back to the slides here. So the process really begins with external events that we experience through our five senses. And they're the visual. So we're talking about seeing here, everything that we take in with our eyes, auditory, the hearing where the ears come in, our kinesthetics, very important as well. So we're talking about the feelings, the touch, the emotions, and then we have also the taste and the smell. Now, our sensory input channels, as we call, in other words, the five senses, are exposed to around 2 million bits of information every single second. Then they are filtered through the following internal process filters, which are determined by our perception of, and there are 7 filters, which I would like to go through now. The first one is the environment. This is one of the most unconscious filters on how a person perceives and experiences their environment, which includes, by the way, time, space, matter, and energy. Now, this filter is the most unconscious filter, as I said, which we have and are personal experiences. And I understand, just to make it measurable, we actually designed logical units around it, like clocks. And many people assume that the perception of these concepts are the same for everyone. But actually, nothing is less true. We all experiencing time, space, matter, and energy in a different way. Now, what does that mean in regards to a class or meeting room, for example? Well, as you may know, the universe is in absolute balance. Where there's a left, there must be a right. Where there's good, there must be bad, just like the yin and yang. So when something expands, something else has to shrink, right? So therefore, we want to create an environment where people matter. So matter, in other words, feeling significant and can contribute, which means time flies. So the participants perceive time shorter because the matter or their significance expands. And if people matter and can actually make a difference, they feel calm and collected, which is the energy part. And the space feels very spacious. Versus an environment where people are told what to do and are constantly put down. This is where people shrink. Literally, they shrink. So the reference is made here to matter again. And that's where the time expands, and 1 hour feels almost like 2 or 3 hours. So it's really a perception we have and how we interpret things with that filter. And if people don't matter, they feel stressed and even have an anxiety. To an extent, perhaps, that the space can become claustrophobic, to a point where we hear comments described in metaphors like, I just need to get out of here. I can't breathe. The ceiling is falling on my head. Interesting, isn't it? So, a bit of a different perspective of how we have very unconscious filters in us. So, our behaviors are already affected by the environment on a very unconscious level. Now, the next filter is the meta programs. The typical patterns we look for when selecting and processing information. The meta program actually guides and directs our thought process and determine how we motivate ourselves, how we make decisions, buy things, what we are interested in, how we manage time, how long we stay in a job or a relationship, our effectiveness with tasks, and how we actually solve problems. They are sort of our software, I would describe that as. And there's actually no right or wrong about them, not at all. They are simply one way a person perceives or processes information. This is, by the way, also where the psychometric testing fits in, such as Myers-Briggs, eDiscs, and a lot of other tools that are available. Then there are language filters, the language we use and our understanding of words and gestures, the ability to structure external events and give it a meaning by using language. Now, this is really interesting. Research has shown that the person has over 65,000 thoughts per day, which we can't turn off. 65,000 conversations each day is a lot. Now, your thoughts, made up of language, are your constant companion. Now, more intense actually even than a relationship you have with your best friend. So you better make sure that those thoughts are positive and supportive ones, as it is a huge impact on your emotional state and therefore your behaviors. Now, language provides us with the ability to structure external events and give it a meaning. Now, the greater capacity for language, the more shades anyone can apply in the structure of the outside world. Then we're going into the values and beliefs. Values are stable, long-lasting beliefs about what is really important to us. They are our compass and steer our perception of what we are paying attention to and motivates us in advance to do what we want to do and afterwards actually evaluate how satisfied we are in this area and what results we get. And beliefs are mighty. They are really mighty and very powerful mechanism that steer our perception of ourselves and the world at any time of the day. They're really very important when it comes to behavior. Our behavior also govern how we perceive the world. They are, I would almost call, our judgment filter that stops certain things from entering our unconscious mind and shape the way we perceive reality. Now, also interesting is if you actually look up the definition of belief, you will find explanations such as a belief is an acceptance that something exists or is true, especially one without proof. And I'm sure you can all agree that somebody with negative beliefs will demonstrate completely different behaviors than somebody with positive beliefs. Therefore, if you identify negative beliefs in yourself or others, please challenge them with a very supportive and caring personality. I give you an example. My grade 6 daughter just had to sit the test last week, and I could pick up a negative behavioral change in the way, in her way, especially when we actually drove to school, in her facial expression, her posture, and everything. So I asked her, I said, "What is going on?" And she said to me, "I don't feel very confident because I haven't prepared for this test at all." Now, can you pick up on her language a negative belief filter that creates a state of fear and doubt, which causes the negative behavior? So I actually challenged her and said, "Oh, wow, you didn't prepare for this test at all? I actually thought you prepared for this test for the last 7 years since you're going to school." And that it was just really funny. She looked at me and she's like, "Oh, yeah, actually, yeah." She nodded her head and she said, "Yeah, you're right. I almost forgot. This is a great opportunity to showcase how much I've learned over the years." Now, let me ask you a question. Yeah, I just get a few. Oh, that was just a hands up. Thank you, Hasrel. That's very much appreciated. Now, let me ask you, has anything changed on the situation of her having to sit the test? No, not at all. But really, what has changed is how she looked at the situation. and with that, her external behaviors adjusted positively. So we can help change people's behavior in a blink of an eye by asking great quality questions that challenges negative or also called limiting beliefs through critical thinking and literally reprogramming our neural pathways. It's actually quite simple yet very fascinating stuff, isn't it? So next up are our memories. Let me see if I find them. Here they come. Memories. Past experiences deeply affect and influences our perception and personality. Actually, who we are. To give structure to all information that comes to our way or comes our way, we tie this information to what we already experienced, which can be actually a curse or a blessing, depends on the experiences we had in the past. And if we use this filter as a primary source, we might create a self-fulfilled prophecy, believing that the past is equal to our future. Now the next filter, and then we really play around with those filters to really give you an understanding, is decision. The unique way we go about making decisions is based on conclusions after considerations. Now this filter, which is also related to memories, are decisions that we made already in the past. We keep our world model, or what we call our truth, by the way, and stand by that decision that we have made about ourselves and the world on the basis of that past experiences. Now, past decisions create our present values, beliefs, and attitudes. I'll give you an example. You might easily refer to rain as bad weather and sun as good weather. So that is based on experiences you had while it was raining or while there was sun. And last but certainly not least, we have the filter of our attitude, which are collections of values and belief systems around a certain subject. Or you could also say that an attitude has a set of values and beliefs in a particular context. We are usually quite conscious of our attitude and might tell people, well, that is just the way I feel about it. Now, these filters determine how we actually, and this is really important, how we delete, distort, and generalize information. And I give you some facts here. We delete, distort, and generalize information from 2 million bits of information down to only about 134 bits. And those 134 bits are then chunked into about 7 plus minus 2 chunks of information per second. And do you know what we call that, by the way? What do we call that? Just a bit of curiosity here from my end. If you can type in anyone an idea on what we call those 7 chunks that are left out of 2 million bits of information. Yeah, that's a bit of a tricky one, huh? This is actually what we call our reality, believe it or not. So 7 chunks out of 2 million is what we call our reality. So the reality that we experience is largely determined by what we do inside of our heads. And yes, therefore, actually, reality equals perception. Perception equals reality. It's the same thing. Now, this filters or filtering process, I should say, is the reason why every human being experiences any given situation differently, which makes us all unique. Dr. Milton Erickson actually said it beautifully in his quote. He said, everyone's model of the world is as unique as their thumbprint. Just think about if you go to or if you watch the grand final at the MCG for the grand final, there are 100,000 people watching exactly the same game, and every single person has a different experience, and every person will tell you something different. So this is explained with the deletion, distortion, and generalization filter. So this filtering process is also the reason why we experience misunderstandings that often creates negative behaviors. We delete all the time what we are unconsciously decide is not relevant. We distort what we experience so it fits in with what is familiar to us. And we actually generalize and draw conclusions based on a few experiences we had. I give you a real quick example that I'm sure most of you can relate to. Somebody's tense and short with you at work when you ask the person a question, which is the event, the external event. Now you filter and interpret this event, and you may choose to give it a meaning of the person doesn't like me. What have I done wrong? Why does no one appreciate me? Now let's just decode that thing for a quick second. The deletion is the thinking process, and perhaps you delete that the person we ask is very busy and pressured by tight deadlines and didn't even realize that you are in the room, which is their deletion. The distortion in that example is that we are questioning ourselves, although the situation had nothing to do with us. And nobody appreciates me. Nobody is the generalization. So this is how quickly the brain makes decision and filters information through from the outside world into us that gives us a feeling and a behavior. So the way we interpret events in our life or the words in general, the world we see them with our 7 filters, including the deletion, distortion, and generalization process, creates then an internal representation. In other words, our emotional state. And our emotional state equals our physiology and psychology. And it's the same thing. Physiology creates psychology, psychology creates our physiology of what we externally experience, and it takes on the form of a sensory perception. A picture with sound, emotions, feelings, smell, and taste. Remember the 5 senses we had. So your internal representation of an external world creates our emotional state, which then impacts how we respond to the external event, which are our behaviors eventually. So you may wonder, why is judging somebody's behavior or focusing on the negative behaviors a waste of time? What do you think? Just give me some feedback from your end, please. Why is judging somebody's behavior and focusing on the negative behaviors actually a waste of time? Any feedback? And if we look at that screen here, that's absolutely right, Julie, because we can't read their minds. We can't change it. Well said. Yeah. And looking at this model here on the screen doesn't change what's happening. Yes. Yeah. So we can change behaviors, and I guess that is really the question. How do we change behaviors? Bad aura. Yeah, fantastic. Yeah. So looking at this model, we need to realize that the behaviors, fantastic feedback, they're still coming through. Problem focused versus solution focused. I love that. Judging on insignificant information. Yes, and if we look at it, the behavior is the thing that happens last. So yes, because it's the last thing that's happening in the process. People don't change the behaviors actually because they get a written warning or a slap on the wrist. Why? Because they don't know how to. Quite often, yes, they understand that their behavior are not acceptable and that they need to change, and they would if they know how to. And I'm sure some of you can really relate to that. So the $1 million question is, how can we influence behavioral change in self and others? So we can clearly see the behaviors is the last thing, it's the outcome, it's the result. So how can we influence behavioral change in self and others? Just waiting a bit for you guys to type. Let's see what you come up with. looking at that communication model, how can we change behavior in self and others? Or I would say better influence, because yes, we can't really change them, but we can influence, and we cover that a bit later down the track as well. Positive engagement, absolutely, Caroline. Yes. Positive reinforcement, yes. By our respond, absolutely fantastic. I love it, Judy. Yes, the way we respond will have an impact on the other people. Absolutely right, spot on. Change our language, adjust the environment, looking for the positive. You guys are awesome, absolutely fantastic. Yes, positive language. Ask for further information. Yes, ask a lot of questions. We go into that as well. Open mind, no judgment. Yes, absolutely. Acceptance. And I think acceptance is an absolutely important word in today's environment. So you guys really rock. That's awesome. So yes, we can change the meaning. In other words, how you or they interpret events by recovering valuable information that has been unresourcefully deleted, distorted, or generalized through our 7 filters. As you know by now, our behaviors are based on our internal representation, what inside of our head, in other words. What if the bits we delete are the exact ones that we need to make to transform our behaviors? Yes, what do you think happens if we change our environment? What if we start to look at our past experiences in a different way? Perhaps with more acceptance, as Julie just said, with more acceptance rather than regrets, blame, guilt, and judgment. What if we start to make different decisions or demonstrate a different attitude towards certain people or situations? What if we start to change our language where we start to speak a more positive and rather than a negative language? Where we language what we actually want rather than what we don't want. Focus on solutions rather than problems and speak an empowering language. So that's really a summary of what I've just got from you guys. You're really amazing. That's awesome. I'm sure and hope that you're learning a lot through this webinar. So, for example, if you start talking about choices, opportunities, solutions, acceptance, clarity, action, and achievements in our conversation, meetings, or classroom, rather than using words like being stuck, problems, excuses, judgment, blame, vagueness, procrastination, what else comes to my mind? Hopelessness. That's really where our behaviors and the behaviors of others will change. Because, and I quickly give you an overview here, because the meaning we give, the positive meaning, creates actually, in fact, positive emotions that supports positive actions and behaviors, which ultimately creates positive outcomes and results. Whereas negative language, and we can do the same thing here, whereas negative language and meaning creates negative emotions, that leads to negative behaviors, which ultimately creates negative outcomes and results. Actually, a quote from Nelson Mandela just popped in my mind on this topic. He said, "May your choices reflect your hopes, not your fears." So you need to ask yourself, is what you or people around you, for example, in your team, classroom, etc., are living out what you or they would actually need? What if you or they are actually filtering out the very thing that would create more confidence, achievements, and success, and therefore create more positive behaviors and fulfillment? What have you or they deleted, distorted, and generalized in their past? What is it that we are leaving out, and what do we need to start filtering in? If we are not satisfied with the way we perceive the world and the results we get, we need to change what and how we filter in information. We need to remind ourselves of the great achievements we had in the past, which will motivate us and shift our focus to empowerment and possibilities. We are constantly faced with choices. We can choose to filter out all the evidence of the possibilities that we can, or start to choose to filter out all the evidence of the possibilities that we can't. And it is a choice. So change doesn't happen by chance, it actually happens by choice. If we believe that we want to give it an all and give it a 100%, we are probably doing or going to filter in and notice evidence of how we can. We will be starting to notice our strength and what we can do. However, if we decide that we most likely can't do it or don't even bother, then we are going to filter evidence to support that as well. Just like the famous quote by Henry Ford outlines, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. And remember, our behaviors will reflect our focus and choices. So it comes down to what we focus on because this is what we filter in to the exclusion of everything else. And please remember, uh, as Anthony Robbins said, nothing, really nothing in life has any meaning except the meaning we give it. So let's have a look at how we can recover valuable information with powerful question techniques that will allow us to change the meaning or interpretation of a difficult situation into a more positive one. So here we have a few questions or statements, I actually should say, and we're looking at some of the questions that we could ask. And I think Albert Einstein also said it beautifully. We cannot solve problems by using the same kind of thinking we used when we created them. So asking great questions is a powerful tool to recover valuable information and positively influence behavioral change in self and others very quickly. Just like the example I just gave you with my beautiful daughter who had to take the test earlier. It enables actually the transformation of deletion, distortion, and generalizations to create a more positive perception of a difficult situation. And the more positive state, so emotionally, we are in, the more positive our behaviors become. So let's start with the deletion part up here. A statement is if you hear that, I have a lot of stress in my job. And I'm sure this is quite a common one these days. This is a typical nominalization. Jesus, that's a hard word. It's a recipe for misunderstanding, actually. So let me try again. Nominalization are processes, in other words, verbs that we turn into nouns. Doing this directs misleading messages to our brain. In this case, stress is the actual outcome from a process of stressing and putting pressure on ourselves. Now, by changing the process stressing out into a fixed static thing, stress, we often feel left with an unchangeable outcome and limit our choice for action. And I think that makes sense. So, really, verb process to nominalization stress, which is the outcome. So by asking, as an example, give you one here, what is actually or what is it exactly that is stressing you out? Is there we bring back the process and that creates clarity on the issue or what we actually do that gives us the outcome and provides the person with the possibility to change it by doing something different. The next one is they don't listen to me and she or he is a better person. So that puts the person down. These are actually two simple deletions because they are missing description where parts of the meaning are completely left out or lost, which can easily create confusion in our brain. So by asking who is they or better than whom or better at what provides more clarity on the specifics and putting things in a different perspective of what is actually compared with what. By asking perhaps even a follow up question of, can you tell me three things that you are better than the other person who I mentioned, supports the change of behaviors even more because the person will realize even if the other person is better at something, they also have their qualities and areas of expertise, which give them confidence, self esteem, significance, and so much more. That again has a positive impact on the behaviors and how to move forward. So let's go into the distortion, and I hardly can keep up here with all the answers. You don't like me. That's a typical thing. Quite often we hear that with people that are a bit angry or disappointed or frustrated. This is what we call a mind read because we are jumping to conclusions. So asking a question like, how do you actually know that I don't like you? Requires evidence of making that statement. And that creates then a conversation where misunderstandings can easily be resolved in that conversation. And we are so much better off. The next one is you make me sad. This is what we call and is based on cause versus effect, which are statements about how our belief system works. Like all beliefs, just because we believe something, it does not make it true. So asking a question like, what did I do for you to choose feeling sad, can move people from being affected by our action to actually take responsibility and causing things to happen. And can you see how I actually use the word choose within our question? That already presupposes that it is their choice and responsibility of how they interpret our action and therefore how they feel. So it gives them more empowerment to change something if they don't like it, because they can give it any meaning they actually like. The next one is she or he yelled at me, she or he doesn't like me. This is an example of a complex equivalence because we assume that one thing equals another. She or he yelled at me equals she or he doesn't like me. Now, asking a question like, have you ever yelled at someone you liked? And here it is, can be very liberating as this simple question can completely change our belief filter because we realize that the person in actual fact yelled because they really care and like the other person. Otherwise, they wouldn't have bothered and would even invest any energy in them. So this is a really great question, which really changes the emotion and how we see things by recovering really important information. And the last step is the generalization, and I'll put two together here. She and he never listens to me, and nobody likes me. These are two typical examples of what we call universal quantifiers that are generalizing information to a point that outlines there is no exceptions and no choices anymore, which creates huge limitations for us. So asking questions like never, what would happen if he or she did? So here it comes. Or why do you think I'm actually talking to you? That is really a question that can completely change the perception of that person by recovering choices again and changing the perception of being left out. And the last question to cover that off as well, I cannot have that difficult conversation. Here is what we call a model operator of necessity versus possibility, which refers to our mode of operating and therefore is a big difference between doing something because you feel you should, must, have, or need to, which is a necessity, so in other words, no choice, or because you can, will, want to, which is a possibility, so on your own terms. So asking a question like, and I think I'm back up to date again, that's awesome. What would happen if you did? Forces the person to consider possibilities and therefore creates choice. And as more choices we have in life, as better off we are. So the person really is better off than before. Now, I believe all of these recovering questions will assist the person to master their problems with a different mindset and more positive behaviors because we created much more choice for them. So let's get some clarity on what is in our control and what's not when it comes to behavioral change. And before I go in there, are there any questions? Does it all make sense? If you can just quickly raise your hands. Great strategies for changing perceptions. Yes. And please keep in mind perception equals reality. Yes. Good work. Awesome. I'm glad. Fantastic. So, really, let's be a bit critical when we listen to people. Listen to what they say, but listen to also what they're actually not saying. Let's analyze a bit more. Let's really pay attention to what really people want to bring across, where they are in their mindsets, what is their perception actually, and how can we help them to create a better reception. So that's awesome. Fantastic. Cool. Let's get into the next part. As I said, let's see what's actually in our control and what's not. In fact, that's actually really an easy one, but so important. In fact, there's only one thing that you have 100% control over, which is, here it comes, the certainty within yourself. That's it, the certainty within yourself. And this, in fact, includes only two things, which are, yeah, oh, cool. Some people really getting it. That's awesome. Certain things, so certainty within includes, and here it comes, first of all, the way you interpret things in life. It is absolutely up to you. You can choose if you want to be angry, upset, sad, fun, make fun of a situation. It is really up to you, and it depends on the way you interpret things in life. And therefore, depends on how you interpret things in life, therefore, how you respond to it. It's actually quite simple, isn't it? You have 100% control over yourself. This is what we call certainty within. And there is a correlation between our internal and external worlds. So our state of mind or mindset, including our confidence, self-esteem, etc., and what's happening outside of us. Now, fact is that as more certainty and confidence and control a person has within themselves, the less certainty or control they need in the world they live in. Because they know that they have the confidence and tools to deal with whatever comes their way, which certainly helps when we get into situations where people demonstrate undesirable behaviors. Now, how you respond will influence the people around you. In other words, the environment you live in, which we call our circle of influence. Influence is a great and very powerful leadership tool, as you can see from this webinar, but is often underestimated. And this is where our control and responsibility stops. Why? Because it is the other person's responsibility and choice how they will interpret your response. This is where their control starts. As much as we need to learn to take responsibility for our own action and, of course, inaction, as much we have to learn to let go of other people's responsibilities and the illusion of being in control of other people. Because this is where we enter the ego land, which is the ultimate illusion control. I need to say that again. The ego land, everything that is external of us, other people are not in our control. The ego land is the ultimate illusion of control. So let's put our time and energy where we can achieve an outcome and make a difference. Make sense? So to wrap up this webinar, I really would like you
We've just had a slight little technical hitch with Martin's headset, but we're looking at that now, and we'll come back.
Can you hear me
Hope.
again?
Oh, here he comes. Yes,
There he
please. Thank
is.
you, Martin.
I think the system kicked me out. Ah, good work. You can hear me again. Now you just need to give me an update on where you actually lost me so I can kick back in again to ensure we don't miss any information whatsoever. Eagleland. Oh yeah, Eagleland. We want to stay away, and I think we just overloaded the system with negative energy there because we have no control over the Eagleland at all. So let me quickly get back into it, and I think I start with that slide. Just to quickly review, there's only one thing that we really have control over 100%, which is the certainty within. And the certainty within has only two components to it. The first thing is we have 100% control over the way we interpret things in life. And the way we do that has an impact on how we respond to it, which are our behaviors. Cool. So these are really much the 100% we have. And the way we respond to it, in other words, the behaviors we choose through our interpretation, will influence the people around us. In other words, that's what you can see in the gray area, which we call the circle of influence, where we have some control. And let's face it, a lot of people really underestimate that area, as I said. Not sure if you heard that as well. As you can see from this webinar, some really great questions, changing any of the 7 filters, bringing back deleted, distorted, or generalized information that are important to change the emotional state can have a huge positive impact on other people. And what's happened there is this is really where it stops, because we need to understand as well that we cannot take control over anything else, over other people, because that's where the ego land is, which is the ultimate illusion of control. And as I said, to wrap up, and I think that's where you lost me, to wrap up this webinar, I really would like to share with you an epiphany that I had not that long ago when I was in my thinking space. And I had this epiphany that every time you think the problem is out there, you actually empower what's out there to control you. In other words, if we believe the other person or the other thing is the problem, then we are at effect. We are affected by it because we hand over all the power to the other person or thing by believing we don't have any. And if the other person or the other thing really is the problem, don't we want to have control and be empowered as much as possible to deal with that situation effectively by influencing the other person's behavior in a positive way so we can achieve a win-win outcome? Yes, of course, we want to. That makes sense, doesn't it? So cool. So what needs to happen is your mind or our mind needs to shift from what's out there has to change first to what changes can I make in order to change what's out there. Now, this mindset of excellence gives us empowerment, helps us to step up, position ourselves in the best possible emotional state, and be very proactive on what is in our control rather than being affected and conditioned by others and reactive to their action and problems. This is true leadership and gives us the opportunity to lead and positively influencing behavioral change in self and others to achieve sustainable win-win outcomes and confidence. Now, I'm sure this has given you a lot of different perspectives and thought-provoking concepts. So I encourage you to listen to the recording of today's webinar over and over again to reflect on our learnings and to really get the most out of it so you can implement these strategies with ease. I wanted to give you now the opportunity to ask any questions you may have in relation to influencing behavioral change in self and others. And please also feel free to share your key learnings, what strategy you will implement, which is so important because we need to utilize our knowledge from this webinar, and most importantly, what difference will it make? Not only in your behaviors, but also in the behaviors of others. So I'm happy to receive any questions you have. It's just handing that over to you now. This might be a silly questions. No, I don't think there is any silly questions there. How do you apply this concept in a situation where someone didn't reply to your WhatsApp message for days, weeks, but you can see blue ticks? How to respond, you can see. Now, that's a really good question, actually. If somebody doesn't reply to your message, I would perhaps change the situation or the social media. I would perhaps get in touch with them over the phone, perhaps an email. Do something else. If we realize something doesn't work, let's just try something else and find out. And even there, let's say worst case scenario, if the person don't want to talk to you because they are upset about what you said or what you've done, there is nothing you can do. As I said, we cannot control the other person. Yes, please take responsibility, try different things from your end, but there's only so much you can do. If that helps, hopefully. Could you show the slide prior to Egoland? Yes, I can certainly do that. And please remember, you also get a recording. Egoland, let's go back there. Question techniques, I think that's what you're looking for. I also have a question. If after the recording, a recovery question, yes, it's a negative statement, they just have a way to bring back the negative statement. How would you manage this? Nobody likes me. Why do you think I'm here? Only you, nobody else. Do the same thing again. That's a question from Hilaria. Do the same thing again. Only me, nobody else? Really? And maybe you need to help them along a bit more. Say, so what's about your partner? What's about your kids? What about your friends? So I'm the really only one. And you see, as more you ask those questions, as more the person has to admit that they are loved by more and more people, as more at ease they are, as more they are the hero rather than the victim, as more you empower them to take action, as more you help them feel good and get significance. My key learning, other people's opinions are not of my business. Yes, and I'm actually quite controversial, Caroline. I quite often say as well, and please don't get me wrong here, what other people think of you is none of your business. So let me put that in contents. What I mean by that, of course, I do care. And I do care how people perceive me, but I also understand that people perceive me and judge me based on their reality. Does that make sense? And if they are in a negative space, they will most likely see me negative. Carl Jung actually said that beautifully. He said, you cannot see the world the way it is. You can only see the world the way you are. Now, that's a very deep quote, but what it really means is if we have two people looking at the same world, one comes from anger, what do you think they see? They see anger everywhere. The other person that comes from peace, from calmness, from abundance, do you think they see the same thing? They are looking at the same thing, but they don't see the same thing. They see abundance. I hope that makes sense. Using recovery question is a real skill and difficult to apply when you are in the volatile situation. Any hints for developing the skills? Yes, I completely understand that, Deborah. It can be difficult. And please, what is really important, we need to make small steps. Small steps, the small things in life that we change creates big changes over time. And I think, yes, I just wanted to give you some examples here that you can take away. I want you to become aware of people's language. Just listen in to the negativity. And if somebody mentions or language what they don't want, which we see often here in Australia, how are you going? Not bad. Where are you going? Not far. What are you up to? Not much. The people actually don't tell you anything, because why would you tell people exactly the thing that they are not doing? which leaves misunderstanding because we need to fill in the blanks. So maybe it's just start with one thing, with a deletion, with a distortion, or just with negativity and positivity, and help them to change and say maybe, so if you're not bad, so what does that mean? Or not bad meaning you're good or you're awesome or you're fabulous, you're phenomenal. What is it exactly? And that helps them to find the right words to actually get in touch with their emotions. Cool. I get quite a few comments here. Let me just quickly get up here again. Some people agree. My key learnings, we had that. Yes, and I hope that helps, Deborah. Thank you. Exactly. Yeah, people's perception on my reflection. Yeah, their reality. Perhaps a tip is not to respond too quickly. Think of the moment. Yes, think of the moment, Rebecca. Absolutely right. And that comes back to the first filter of environments. If we want to have a serious conversation, if we need to deal with negative behaviors, we need to be very clear about the timing. We need to be very clear about the matter, the space, the energy, and everything. So please, behaviors, negative behaviors should be communicated in an open space, bright lights, when we have time to talk about, not between meetings, something that we can really focus on 100%. Great tips, Rebecca. Yes, absolutely. Have I missed any of the questions? I hope not. Sending some positive vibes. I'm just going up a bit. Yeah, cool. And I think we are just running out of time. I think it was really great session. Thank you very much for your contribution. You've been really amazing. And I want you to thank you for your participation and contribution. Thank you as well. Thank you for sending through all those messages. They are wonderful. And I wish you all great success with implementing your new learnings and strategies. Till next time, be awesome and dare to make a difference. And I now hand back to Maria. Thank you very much. You guys are awesome.
Thank you so much, Martin. That was highly enlightening, and I think I want that recording too, so I can go over it and over it and over it too. Thank you, everyone. I can see that you obviously enjoyed this webinar, and hopefully we can encourage Martin to do a couple more for us. Your feedback, as I mentioned before, is important in helping us deliver these quality programs. So you will receive an email shortly with a short evaluation, and we please encourage you to fill that in. And also your certificate of attendance and a copy of this webinar recording will be emailed to your nominated email address. So thank you, everyone. Good to see you all again. And I know we've all enjoyed today's webinar. I don't even have to say I hope you did, because I know you did. So, and we'll see you again soon. Thanks so much. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, Martin.
Bye-bye.